You're listening to the Art Said podcast, episode number 7, a conversation with Cindy Ingram, the art class curator. Welcome to the Art Said podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose. Today, we are so excited to have Cindy Ingram with us. She is a writer, an artist, a poet, an educator, an entrepreneur, and probably the list could go on even beyond that. Connecting with works of art and crafting innovative learning activities, she has dedicated her life to bringing the magic of art connection to others. A former art museum educator, art teacher, and the founder and CEO of Art Class Curator since 2014, Cindy is passionate about taking art out of the dark, stuffy lecture halls and out of the pretentious gatekeeping of fine art and into the hearts, minds, and lives of everyone. She measures her success with the volume of tears shed. Welcome, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining Edric and I today.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. So I'd like to start off by saying this. Reading through the, what you sent of pieces of the book that I had a chance to take a look at, there are a lot of different directions to go in. There's a tremendous amount to talk about. It was almost as if I was reading through somebody's journals, what it felt like. It felt like journaling. So there are different directions to go in. Like I said, you could spend 15 minutes. We could spend the whole thing time talking about definitions of wholeness. We could talk about the hard work of self-realization and what that means as you're working through a process. We could talk about the particular struggles of an individual's life and social challenges, right, given your background and your history. And we could also, and this is where I like to focus more, but choices made about the best way to present art or art ideas to various audiences, right? So how you go about doing that. What I really appreciate is the way you started off with this epiphany, right? Because I think it's a universal experience. I think everybody has that experience of this epiphany with some sort of work of art or a piece of music. Because I had one myself, and it was a point in my life where I was traveling around. I was working for a retail company in Ohio, and I walked into Toledo. So I walked to Toledo Museum of Art, and there was a piece by Matisse there. It was his cutouts, right? So it was that time period in his life where he couldn't get out of bed, right? So he had, he had them. They would tape paper to the ceiling. He had a long stick with charcoal he would draw on the ceiling. He couldn't paint, so he would cut, colored pieces of paper to make works. And this was a huge mural that was ceramic, and it was one of the cut paper pieces, right? Made as I just remember thinking about how much, even though he was in such pain, he wanted just to give joy, right? And I stood and for 2 minutes, I just stood there and cried, And it was exactly that kind of epiphany. And it was clear, and it was, I was doing this retail job, and I was like, listen, you're an artist. This is what your heart and your life is connected to. You're not in the wrong lane, you're on the wrong highway going in the wrong direction. But I think those kinds of experiences are, what really engage you. So I'm curious about the way you talked about your epiphany and how you start to translate that into this particular book.
And I'm going to jump in before she gets into it and just say, just to put out there, the title of the book is Art is About Being Whole, a Memoir by Cindy Ingram. So in case anybody's like, we just teased so much that here's the title, folks. And there's links in the description and available with the podcast to get yourself a copy.
Thanks. Yep, Shauna, that was going to be my next line. I'm like, in case you're wondering, this is what it is. Yes. And this moment that I described, it's in the first chapter of the book. It's a very pivotal moment for me. I had already been, I'd already gotten my bachelor's in art history. I'd already, art had been my love for a long time. I was working in museums, and I was applying to get my PhD in art history. So I remember I'd taken the GREs. I had written the essays. I'd already applied to one place. It was right in the middle of the process. I already got my letters of recommendation. I was doing it. And that's when the MoMA in New York City was put on. It was under renovation, and so they sent the famous ones to a couple places around the country, and Houston was one of them. And I lived in Dallas, so we drove down in one day there and back to see this exhibit. And I remember, it was the second room of the exhibit, the first, or maybe it was the third, but it was I was going through the Van Goghs and the Monets and things, and I turned the corner, and I saw Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror. And if you've never seen it in person, it's huge. It's bigger than you're expecting it to be. And it was like the wind was knocked out of me. It was almost like I just felt like a punch in the stomach, and so I beelined immediately to it, and I could not leave that painting.
Mhm.
I cried, I thought, I looked, I just could not leave it. My husband was with me, and he did the entire rest of the exhibit and came all the way back around, and I was still there. I mean, he doesn't take as much time as I do in art exhibits, to be fair, but he went through all the dollies and all the things, and I was still there. And I just remember being like everything I had worked towards with art, everything I had ever felt with art, everything I ever thought or felt, I felt in that moment about art. And it was a moment of clarity too. It was like I understood the emotional connection I had with art on a deeper level that I never knew. And then I also realized that I don't need to know anything. I was like, I don't care what the label says. I don't care what year this was made. I don't care what was happening in Picasso's life. I don't care I didn't care who influenced him. I don't care about any of it. Like everything I need is right here in front of me. And it was this and then I got worried that, well, what if I know too much? And then it takes away the emotion and the magic of art. If I go in and then someone tells me this is how Picasso felt and this is what he painted, what does that mean for my personal experience in front of it? And so I left and I wrote a 4-page essay on the car ride home. I don't think I wrote about that in the book, although some of those words from that 4-page essay did make it into the book. Like that me describing that experience were my words from back then. Yeah, and it just changed everything about. And so I canceled my PhD application. So I was like, I don't want to study all the details. I want to experience more magic of art, and I want to help others also experience it. So
That's something I've never really heard before. I've never really heard somebody say it in exactly that kind of way. So what I thought was interesting was in the book you mentioned moving away from wanting to be an art historian and explaining and looking at things that sort of a way and having more of a direct approach. But I'm curious about how you kind of intuitively felt that you could communicate that to others and find a way to share that with others without all those other things around it.
Yeah, it took me 20 years to figure out from that point. I mean, it's almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years on New Year's Day this year. Oh, I should celebrate that. That's really neat. I should go to New York on New Year's. I just made my travel plans. Okay.
And we'll meet up because Edric and I are right outside the city. So we'll meet up.
There we go. Everybody, January 1st, we're meeting up at MoMA if they're open.
There you go.
Okay. Distracted. Yeah, I knew. So it wasn't like I knew exactly how to do it in that moment.
Okay.
I just knew that I needed to. And so then I started thinking, it was this thought process that is evolving. I used to always say, okay, there's the artwork, and then there's the person, and then there's the teacher, and then there's the other people. And I would just do these hand gestures, and I'm like, all these connections are happening. And I even drew it all out for my master's program once because I had to create my philosophy education. And I did that even when I create art class curator. I would be like, well, there's this, and then there's, I would always do that. And then finally, just in the last few years, I was like, wait, it's energy, and it's an energetic connection. We're looking at it, we're putting ourselves into it. The artwork is putting itself towards us, and those things are intermingling. And so it's different for every person. And then so it's not static. The artwork really is always kind of pushing out the same types of things, but what makes it to the person is going to be different. So I really started to kind of figure it out in the last few years, like what am I actually talking about? But it's been kind of a slow progression of trying to figure it out. And you'll see, if you look at my history of art class curator, you'll see at the beginning, I did a lot of, I put my art history lessons up there. I did, and it was like a lot of typical museum education things that I would put in. But then kind of towards the end, not the end, there's no end, it's still happening. But now it's more there's a lot more personal connection. There's a lot more students finding themselves in the artwork. And so it has been kind of a slow growth. And I've only just now like created a framework for like what I'm actually doing. And I'm working on the PDF for that today. So pretty soon it'll be an opt-in. So you'll be able to download it. Add it to it.
That's one of my questions. I was curious about how you created a process to allow that to happen, because again, I think it can happen, but I think you have to guide students. You have to guide
Right.
people in a certain way. No, you want to look at these things. You want to think about how it relates to you personally. You want to think about what you feel about this, the way those colors are speaking to you, and calling up again things of your past, right? Calling up elements of your past, because that moment that happened for me and the moment that happened for you, it wasn't just right in that moment. There were all these things that led up to it.
Right.
So how do you call? I'm asking you now in your process. How do you help students or viewers to call those things into their experience so that they have the opportunity to really have that personal exchange one-on-one with the work?
Yeah. So I've been experimenting with the process over the last few years. And I've tried it out a few different ways, but I think I finally got it figured out. So it's pretty much a 4-step process. The 5th step is like picking the work of art, which the teacher gets to do that for the person. So this is like an individual too, but the first step is just being with the artwork. So it's looking at it, it's meditating on it, it's kind of just letting your eye wander, it's letting your mind wander, and just letting things kind of unfold. It could be some free writing. I like to do that with students. Like when they come in, they just kind of free write on a work of art, just allow them to explore whatever they want. It's also in a classroom situation is building a culture that's expected and allowed, like that
Yes.
you're not looking for a correct answer in these cases.
Yes.
And the students are used to this
absolutely.
type of thought. Yeah. And creating a culture of safety where they feel comfortable sharing themselves too. So there's a whole other thing to talk about there. And then the second step is just like traditionally interpreting the artwork, talking about what you notice, what do you think's going on, and that's really beautiful because all the students bring in their ideas, and then it gets deeper and deeper. And then the third step is where I have students write on this, and then I allow them to share if they want to share, but no one's required to share because some deep stuff can come up. But that step is like, what does this remind you of in your everyday life or in your life? So is there something in here that you feel is a message for you? Is there something happening in this that has happened in your life, or something you struggle with, or something you're excited about? Or it doesn't have to be like a negative, deep, emotional thing. It can be just like, it could be something joyful. And then we don't stop there though, because if you've ever done kind of work in self-development or therapy, it's like awareness is great and being aware of your issues, but if you don't do anything with that awareness, like what is that good for? And so the fourth step is thinking about, well now what am I going to do to take this forward in my life? Like what lesson did I learn? What change can I make? Just a specific example is I've done this with an artwork it's at the Meadows Museum in Dallas, and it's he's kind of looking down and it's like this muddy soup in front of him. It's Miguel Barcelo's Sopa de Europa, and he's in this like beautiful library, but it's all this black stuff. But and a lot of the realizations are, I get so caught up in the problems in front of me that I don't look around and see the beauty. And so one thing they step forward could be is, maybe I take some time and actually look around and see what's good in my life rather than focusing on the trouble. So like, it's just a little nudges in the direction of growth. And so that's my process.
Good.
Yeah. And works with adults, works with students too. I think it's so important to teach them these processes.
I was curious about that too, because in terms of scaling that approach to adults versus younger and younger students, I taught high school most of my life. I'm now currently teaching kindergarten and first grade.
And preschool. Don't forget about preschool.
Really different.
Yeah. Oh, I want you to try this with them and tell me, because I have not tried it with that age.
Ooh.
But they're always making connections to their personal life. It's just like, their dogs and their cats and their brother that said this, and
they don't have anything else to connect to. That's all they know is their experience in their world.
Right. Yeah.
So again, so I want to ask a question, given some of what I read in the book. Do you believe it's at the bottom of the doc, but do you believe there's usually a current that connects healing along with connection and creating? And I'm thinking about this in terms of there's a book called Art and Fear. You probably Know of
Oh,
it?
I have not. I'm gonna write it down.
Oh, Art and Fear. But it talks about the difficulty of doing your own work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your work, not Mozart's work, because Mozart already did his thing. It's like it's really what your work is about. There's also another book, what the War of Art. You ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen
Yeah, I've
Pressfield?
started it and I never
Yeah, it's a great
finished.
book. But he talks about resistance, right?
Yeah.
He talks about there's this thing. He actually goes almost Freudian with this. So in in terms of I'm curious about, again, that element of healing, because you seem to be
Mhm.
you speak about that a lot in the book.
Yeah.
But how much do you see that element of healing having to do with connectioning and creating?
Yeah, it's been a really powerful experience for me. I've lived, I've been dedicated to sharing art for, at least 20 years, and more than now at this point. I keep saying 20, but I'm gonna have to up that to 25 pretty soon. I think it maybe is, but as another thing. And I got my degree in art history. I taught art. I did all these things, but making art for myself is not something that I really ever did. I would make the posters for the pep rally, or I had to make state test encouragement posters once. I mean, like all that kind of stuff.
Well,
Like,
but that's but I'm also talking about the connection. But
Yeah.
because connection is
Oh,
the
yeah.
important thing.
Oh yeah. But then, yeah, I was like, oh, I'm telling the long backstory here. But in the last couple years, I was like, it was a point in December 2021. I was sitting here like, okay, how can I show people how powerful this is? The way I connect with art. And the answer that I got back from my brain, wherever that came from, was that through my own art. And I was immediately like, no, that can't happen. That's no. That was my first reaction, is I can't do that. But then there's also, there was these thoughts of art has to be a certain way, art has to be sellable. I can't make money doing
Yes.
that. And so I started to make my own art for myself.
Good.
And that process, though, was so healing in itself too, because it was like allowed me to focus on the process, allowed me like this meditation space, allowed me this like free space to really think about who I am. And that was healing for me, like all those art wounds. And we all have those art wounds that, like, most people are like, oh, I used to like art, but then I don't anymore. Or I used to draw when I was a kid, but I don't anymore. And I think that has helped me heal those wounds. And then in terms of looking at art and connecting with it, I have one really quick story, and I'm not gonna make it too long because I know we're gonna run out of time. But I run a group called the Art Connection Circle, where we do that. We practice this work. We look at art and we talk about how we feel about it. And I pick art that's very deliberately like easy to connect with and that has a lot of depth to it. And in the first session, the first time I ran it, a woman came in, and she had recently had a battle with cancer, and she came, she was in remission, but really, really like within a couple months of her being in remission, like she just got not or just finished. And she was like, I'm not going to tell them about my cancer because I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to make this my story. I'm going to move forward. But the first artwork I put up, she just immediately started crying, and she told us her story. And she was like, I was going to come in here and I was going to keep that from y'all. But when I saw this artwork, I knew that the healing would come, like her healing came with expressing it, with talking about it, with exploring why she didn't want to tell people. And all of that was in that artwork for her to look at. And it was before we even talked about it. She got it from the artwork. And there's a lot of stories like that. So getting the right artwork in front of the right person at the right time can be powerful.
And I think that crosses arts disciplines. I think that goes with hearing a song. I think it goes with seeing a dance, going, viewing a theater production,
100%.
whether it be musical or dramatic. And I think that it transcends all art forms.
Yeah. My introduction, my book is about Disney's Circle of Life. Like before I discovered there was real art out there. I mean, Disney is real art, but that's how I connected, because I didn't know what museums were, I lived in a small town. We didn't have that.
Well, for me, I think that's the power of art.
Yeah.
Is that it has somehow this ability to go past ideas and thoughts and directly into the heart, directly into your emotions, bypasses everything, and it touches that thing that makes all of us human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Beautiful.
think that it can evolve, right? And how we react and relate and connect with a piece, and I'm going to say a piece because I'm talking all art forms,
Yeah.
can change over time.
Oh,
And or, I
100%.
mean, I know for me, it's obviously music, right? And I can hear a song and immediately be transported to a time in my life. And I feel all those emotions just as raw as the first time that song brings out. And so I think that it's really powerful to get our students, if we bring this to like the students route, like to understand that power and to be able to capitalize on it for positive in their life as a means of healing, as a means of expressing their emotions that, and, Edric, you were laughing about the littles, but that's a lot of times they can't express it with words, right? And so giving them another means to be able to release those emotions that many of them are harboring because of the trauma they've faced in their lives, even though they're very, not very long lives.
But they got real
Giving them
power.
that safe space and that avenue. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I also appreciate the piece of circling back. So it's one of my favorite poems is Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, Robert Frost. And, even as a kid, I liked it. But as an adult, you start to realize what that poem is really about. I could just go into those woods and disappear. But you know what? I have promises to keep.
Yeah.
Miles to go before us, and so and the way that so I think it's great. I think that makes a lot of sense for me. The right work in front of the right person. Yeah.
The right time.
Yeah. And our students, they know how to do this. They're doing it with music. You're like Shauna said, they're doing it with even like memes. I mean, they're doing this online. They're doing this already. It's just kind of opening up possibilities for what more they can do and how deep they can go and be a little more intentional too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we could continue this conversation for hours, I think.
Yes, I know we could.
But I hope that out of this conversation, people check out Cindy's work on her website. Again, we'll post it. artisaboutbeinghole.com. There'll be links to buy her book. It is fantastic. Edric and I were privileged enough to get a little sneak peek. It is definitely worth your time. And we thank you for sharing with us today, Cindy, on our podcast, all that you have to offer. And maybe we'll have to circle back and have another episode to kind of dig a little deeper in some other things.
I would love that. Thank you.
Or meet at the museum.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm like
January 1st, we'll do a live we'll do like a live recording all in the same place.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm looking it up as soon as I get off here. Thank you so much for having me. This was a delightful experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.